Hello, and thanks for joining us on Encore. Coming up on today's show, he's been called Libya's reluctant spokesperson. In 2012, Hisham Matar travelled to post-Gaddafi Libya in search of answers about his father, who disappeared more than 20 years earlier. The prize-winning author joins us in the studio to talk about the memoir documenting this journey, entitled The Return. Hisham Matar, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Your recent novel, The Return, it's a memoir of sorts as well. It talks about going back to Libya and the story of your father, who was imprisoned during the Gaddafi years because of opposition to the regime in 1990. You knew he was in a notorious prison in Tripoli, but other details around that were hazy. This ambiguity that you had to live with, how do you think that steered your life, and what were the major consequences of that?
Well, my father was, is counted amongst the disappeared. There are several people who have disappeared in the prison system, who were killed at some point, but by the regime. But how or where and when, where might their remains be? All of that is not known, and that alters. It alters the quality of your grief. It alters the quality of your memories, because the possibility of him being alive at this exact moment, not in some abstract hereafter, but exactly at this moment in the day, under the same sun, under the same moon, is a vivid and real one, and it alters the quality of your minutes. How you eat, how you read a book, how and the majority of my life I lived under that condition. And so after the revolution, I went back, not only to re-engage with the country that I hadn't seen for 33 years, but also to try to find information about what might have happened to my father.
And have you come to some kind of peace with that ambiguity?
I don't know if peace is the right word. I mean, one of the things that I'm not particularly, I think, interested in resolution. I'm not interested in somehow, that word that they use in America, closure, because I don't think anything ever closes. I think the interesting thing about life is all of it is there. Everything that has happened to you and me is here in some way. We might choose not to attend to it, and of course we can't always be attending to it, otherwise we can't be in the present. But I was more interested in fostering an active engagement with this history that is driven more by curiosity and the need to understand what not only happened to my father, but happened to the country and happened to so many other people, rather than find a way to feel better.
Now, there's a passage in the book where you say that your family tried to dissuade your father from his anti-regime activity because you feared for his safety, and to which he replied that more or less, if you tried to compete with Libya, his country, you would come second. This is a very dramatic commitment to his homeland. Where do you think that came from?
My father was committed to a cause. It's not. It's complicated business being the son of a man who's devoted to a cause. And he was wonderful in so many other ways, but this wasn't an easy preoccupation. And it meant that you're already implicated as a son. You're implicated in a historical event, and also it meant that if you were somebody like me, who was interested in literature and in art and in ideas, I'm not a man of action. And this was a political home. In the Middle East, we call it a political home, filled with people who are engaged in political work, men of action. And so, they look at an obstacle, and the first thing they say is, how do we break the obstacle or go over the obstacle? I'm an artist. I look at the obstacle and I ask questions like, why is the obstacle there? Who put the obstacle there? What might the obstacle want? And so it's a very different take, and that quieter register is not given a lot of space in moments of political urgency. So one of the things that I was trying to do in the book is bring everything up to the surface. The political events, how do you write about disappearance and a massacre and political oppression and hope and revolution, but also how do you write about those those quieter moments? I'm not interested. My interest in politics is not an abstract one. My interest in politics is always about how it affects the intimate life.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say your father was involved in politics, he was a diplomat and a businessman as well, but I do believe he had an interest in literature. You write that he had something of a floating library in his head. What was his relationship with literature and particularly poetry?
He was a great reader. We had a wonderful library at home, and he had this ability and habit and need and desire to commit poems to memory. So he knew by heart pages and pages of verse. And I later on discovered that in prison it was one of the things that he would do at night. In my Uncle Mahmoud's words, who was also a political prisoner and spent 21 years in the same prison. He said when the prison would fall so quiet at night that you could hear a pin drop or a grown man weep softly to himself, you could hear the voice of this steady man reciting poems. So it was obviously an engagement, with literature that ran very deeply with him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, The Return is a book about fathers and sons, you and your father, but also there's another father and son who feature in that book. That's Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi's son. You actually meet the son of the man who was responsible for your father's incarceration. What was that meeting like?
It was very complicated because we both wanted different things from one another. I wanted to find the whereabouts of my father, whether he's alive or dead, and have that confirmed. I suspect he wanted to advance the project of the public relations project of repainting the regime as a reformist regime by having me return to Libya and so on. And so neither of us got what we wanted.
Now, in terms of your literary career as a writer, your work is in English, but at home the language was Arabic, spoken in Libya, and then I think in exile in Egypt. This linguistic shift that many people work with, how does that affect what and how you write, the content as well as the style?
I mean, it's something that in the history of literature has this in it, whether you look at Nabokov or Conrad or writers who were born in one language and then ended up writing in another language. I think that is much more common right now and will become more so because so many people are born on fault lines of cultural shifts, of languages, of geography, are inheritors of one culture but are engaged in another. So my education shifted from Arabic to English when I was 12. So I've been in the English language, having a relationship with it since then. But one of the things that it taught me that actually all language is translation. So it's not that I'm translating from Arabic into English at all, but I'm translating because the nature of language is involved in translation. So, for example, if you were to think, for example, how you feel about the closest people to you. If you choose one person and you just try to evoke how you feel about them, that evocation doesn't arise in language. It arises in an emotion that then you have to find a word for, an approximation, and usually never succeed fully. This is what I find so exciting about language. It's continuous inability to capture wholly the thing.
It's quite hard work as well at times. Now, just briefly, you went back to Libya in 2012, just after the fall of Gaddafi, and you saw what was happening in the beginning of this new country. You met journalists, saw the development of an independent press. Where are we at with that right now? How's that gone since then?
I think the revolution, it was an authentic moment. It was a very natural uprising against, an oppression. And as I always say, the memory of revolutions far exceeds the memory of its protagonists. It's about all of that has happened before. And sadly now we are in a moment that is very complex and compromised, and to engage with it one has to really ask questions about why is it this way. And I think the history not only of the dictatorship but also of our particularly dire colonial experience has left the country very underprepared for this new step. And you have these two things: the fact that it is underprepared, so it has extraordinary challenges, but also it has the curse of this seemingly infinite supply of oil, which means that otherwise reasonable countries have a parasitic relationship to Libya.
Yes.
So that dynamic makes it incredibly difficult for the country.
And which is still definitely in flux at the moment. Now, just briefly to finish off, I know that you're a fan of literature, painting, music, but you've recommended a film for us as a cultural tip. This is Fire at Sea, made by Gianfranco Rosi. It was shot in Lampedusa. What caught your attention about this film?
It's about a subject that is, I think, it's got to be one of the central issues of our time: the migration from the North African coast to Europe, what that migration means, the endless suffering and hope and yearning that involves, the extraordinary risks taken by mothers and fathers and children, young people.
Hisham Matar, I'm sorry, that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll leave you with a short clip of Fire at Sea. Remember, you can get more arts and culture on our website. We're also on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.
We have small children. Please can you have us?
Okay, how many people on board?
I think it's about 150 persons. Most of them is women and kids. Please can you help us very quickly? Yeah, we are staying here in the same coordination. We will not move.
Madam, please, calm down, because we will send rescue, but you need to calm down. Okay, so save your battery. I will call you back, okay?